He said it himself, in his own words, on camera. If I die suddenly, it would shock people, but it wouldn't surprise anybody. That sentence, said years before he died, said by a man who knew exactly what was happening to him, who had looked directly at his own destruction, who had named it, described it, confessed it publicly, and still could not stop it. On the morning of October 28, 2023, Matthew Perry played pickleball for a few hours, came home to his Pacific Palisades residence, and sent his assistant out on an errand. When the assistant returned, they found him in the jacuzzi. He was 54 years old. The autopsy confirmed acute ketamine toxicity and subsequent drowning. 5 people were eventually charged in connection with his death, including an alleged drug dealer known as the Ketamine Queen and a physician. Both pleaded not guilty. But the story of how Matthew Perry got to that jacuzzi did not start in 2023. It started decades earlier, in a childhood defined by absence, in a bottle drained on the grass at 18 years old, in a secret that he carried all the way through one of the most successful television careers of his generation. He told us almost everything in interviews, in his memoir, in confessions that were so raw they were hard to watch. The tragedy of Matthew Perry is not that nobody knew. The tragedy is that everyone knew, including him. And today we are going back through everything he told us, because the confession was always there. We just weren't listening closely enough. Before the fame, before the laugh track, before the Emmy nomination, there was a boy who cried all the time and could not explain why. Matthew Perry's parents separated before he was a year old. His father, John Bennett Perry, a singer, actor, and once the heartthrob of a well-known TV commercial, was largely absent. His mother, Suzanne Morrison, became press secretary for Canadian Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau. She was brilliant, accomplished, and surrounded by admiration wherever she went. And Matthew walked 5 feet behind her. In interviews, Perry described a recurring image that stayed with him his whole life. A big ballroom, his mother walking in and taking up all the glory, and him standing behind her, waiting for her to turn around. All I wanted was for her to turn around and focus on me. He said, "You took me, helped me, I'm a kid." She never really did that, not in the way he needed. His very young parents had separated before he was 1. He remembered as a small boy the day he gave his mother away to her new husband. According to those who have tried to understand the fault lines underneath his addiction, unanswerable childhood questions like those are often where the story actually begins. Perry himself would confirm it. He said he grew up feeling a kind of loneliness, never quite sure he was good enough to belong. That specific feeling, the performance anxiety of a child desperate to be noticed, would eventually find its perfect outlet on a television soundstage in Los Angeles, playing a sarcastic observer of everyone else's lives. He said very simply, "I saw a character, and I was like, I am this guy, I am Chandler." But the character who used jokes to hide discomfort was already being lived long before the cameras turned on. Here is the thing most people never knew about Matthew Perry during the Friends years. He was already drinking every night before the show began. He described the moment it started with disarming clarity. He was 18 years old, lying on the ground with his best friends, staring up at the sky after finishing an entire bottle of alcohol. And in that moment, the warmth, the ease, the feeling that everything was finally okay, he had a thought that he said never left him. This is probably what normal people feel like all the time. That single sentence is the entire story. A young man who had spent his childhood feeling not quite right, not quite enough, not quite seen, and who found at 18 something that made him feel exactly right, exactly enough, exactly seen. By the time he was cast on Friends, the drinking was nightly and it was a secret. Because it had to be a secret. And because it was a secret, he said nobody could help because nobody knew. So he felt in the middle of one of the most celebrated television casts of his generation, profoundly alone. Friends premiered in 1994. The show ran for 10 years, over 200 episodes. Generations of viewers fell in love with Chandler Bing, the deflecting, self-deprecating, chronically uncomfortable one who turned emotional avoidance into comedy gold. Perry was nominated for an Emmy. He dated Julia Roberts early in the run. He became, by any external measure, one of the most successful actors on the planet. And the whole time, every single year of it, he was fighting something that did not care about any of that. As he put it himself in perhaps the most honest thing he ever said publicly. Alcoholism did not care that I was on Friends. It just wants you alone. It wants you sick, and then it wants to kill you. Here is what the public version of Matthew Perry's story always left out. The version that got reported was a simple arc. Matthew Perry had a problem, Matthew Perry went to rehab, Matthew Perry got better, Matthew Perry had a relapse, he went to rehab again. That version is technically accurate, but it is also almost completely wrong about what was actually happening. During the Friends years, those close to him described watching him visibly deteriorating at certain points, losing dramatic amounts of weight, clearly struggling, clearly using something, but they said he was almost impossible to confront about it. He would dodge the conversations, he would deflect. He was, as one person put it, clearly abusing some kind of drug, but addressing it with him directly was something that was pretty hard to do. His co-stars later said they were not equipped to deal with it, that nobody had ever dealt with anything like that before, that the idea of losing him had been something they genuinely feared, but that they had not known how to reach him. Perry had periods of genuine sobriety during the run of Friends. At one point, toward the end of the series, he described being sober and staying sober for a meaningful stretch of time. And then, and this is the confession that matters most, he made a single mistake in his thinking that he would later identify as the deadliest thing he ever did. I started to think, I've got this. That is the moment. That quiet, private thought. The belief that the battle was won. That the disease had been understood well enough to be managed. That the worst was behind him. It was not behind him. It was never behind him. After the show ended in 2004, the cycle continued. Sobriety, then relapse. A new drug, then treatment again. The pattern that those close to him described. Inevitably, you fall back into it, playing out again and again across years of his life. He entered rehabilitation more than 15 times across his adult life. His colon ruptured from opioid overuse, a near-fatal medical event that most of the public did not know about until he disclosed it himself. He was in a coma for 2 weeks. Doctors told people close to him that he had a 2% chance of survival. 2%. He survived, and he came back, and he talked about it, because he always talked about it. Matthew Perry was perhaps the most publicly confessional celebrity addict of his generation, not in a performative or self-pitying way, but in a genuinely purposeful one. He wanted to be useful, and that desire to be useful is the most important thing in his story and the most heartbreaking. For years before he died, Matthew Perry said something publicly that very few celebrities have ever had the courage to say. When I die, I don't want Friends to be the first thing that's mentioned. I want that to be the first thing that's mentioned, and I'm going to live the rest of my life proving that. The thing he wanted mentioned was not the show, not the Emmy, not the fame. It was recovery, specifically his ability to help other people who were where he had been. He said that the best thing about him, bar none, was this. If somebody comes up to me and says, I can't stop drinking, can you help me? I can say yes and follow up and do it. That was his actual dream, not a comeback, not another series, not a clean public image. The dream was to be the person who could answer that call. His final Instagram post, a photo of himself soaking in a hot tub captioned I'm Mattman, was later examined by fans and commentators who said it felt in retrospect like a hidden message. Whether it was or not is something nobody can know, but the investigation into his death told a different and far starker story. Prosecutors stated that in the period leading up to his death, Perry had been receiving ketamine injections 6 to 8 times per day. The 5 people subsequently charged, including the alleged supplier and a physician, had allegedly been providing him with a substance that, at those volumes, could not coexist with a functioning life. His father later opened a foundation in Ottawa in Perry's memory, dedicated to advancing addiction treatment beyond anything his son had been able to access. He said, with a quiet devastation that was difficult to hear, even though he had endless money to throw at the problem, there wasn't the kind of treatment that was going to fix it for him, or help him fix it for good. Endless money, over 15 rehabilitation stays, the fame of one of the most watched television shows in history, the platform to speak about it publicly, the genuine desire to help others. None of it was enough. Strip away the celebrity, and Matthew Perry's story is not really a Hollywood story at all. It is a story about a 5-year-old boy standing 5 feet behind his mother in a ballroom, waiting for her to turn around. About an 18-year-old lying in a field, thinking he had finally found the thing that made him feel normal. About a man who spent 30 years telling the truth about his own destruction in hopes that someone else would be spared it. The confession was always public. He never hid it. He never pretended. He wrote the memoir. He did the interviews. He said the words out loud in ways that were often extraordinarily painful to witness. And the thing that makes his story genuinely different from every other celebrity addiction narrative is this. He knew, he understood the mechanics of his own disease with a clarity that is rare. He could articulate exactly when it started, exactly what it felt like, exactly what the dangerous thought was, "I've got this," and exactly what it would cost him. He knew all of it, and he still could not stop. That is not a moral failing. It is what addiction actually looks like when you remove the stigma and the shame and the simplistic narratives and just look at the thing directly. Matthew Perry looked at it directly his entire adult life. He asked us to look at it too. And maybe if the foundation his father opened in Ottawa does what it is meant to do, and if the treatment options available to the next person are better than the ones available to him, his confession will have been the most important thing he ever did, more important than friends, just like he always said it should be. Drop a comment below because I genuinely want to know, did Matthew Perry's honesty about his addiction change the way you think about addiction itself? Matthew Perry is gone, but everything he said is still here. The interviews, the memoir, the confessions that most celebrities would never have the courage to give. And if this video made you think differently about the gap between what we see when we watch someone on screen and what they are actually carrying, then the next video on this channel is going to hit very differently. Because Matthew Perry is not the only person who told us the truth about what fame costs. The next person we are looking at did the same thing, and the parallels are harder to ignore than you might expect. If you like this video, then don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Thank you so much for watching.